April 1943, Tegel Prison, Berlin. Cell number 92. Over the sound of a key turning in the lock, Dietrich Bonhoeffer hears a distant rumble. Allied bombers are erasing the city he tried to save from the face of the earth. His jailers are Gestapo officers, fanatics, and executioners, evil incarnate. It is here, in the very heart of darkness, that he reaches a conclusion that defies all logic. The greatest enemy of humanity, its most profound threat, is not malice, it is stupidity. How could a thinker who stood face to face with an ideology of pure hatred name his greatest enemy something we consider a harmless flaw? What did he see that we do not? This paradox presents us with two questions. First, why in Nazi Germany did intellectuals, professors, and lawyers most often become the obedient instruments of the regime? Why did the common sense of an ordinary person sometimes offer greater resistance? What compels the mind not to seek truth, but to justify absurdity? The second question is even broader. How could an entire nation, which gave the world Kant and Goethe, abandon critical thinking almost overnight? How does this collective mental collapse occur? By the end of this film, you will have 6 keys from Bonhoeffer's arsenal. We will not just study an old theory. We will crack the code of collective stupidity that is still active today in politics, in the media, and even in our offices. Bonhoeffer's first key shatters conventional logic. The stupidity he speaks of is not a low IQ. It is a moral defect. And high intelligence does not protect against it. It makes a person even more vulnerable. Bonhoeffer distinguished between 2 phenomena. The first is a harmless intellectual deficiency. The second is a dangerous moral choice to surrender one's own judgment. It seems simple, but reality is more complex. An intelligent person does not just accept a slogan, he builds an intricate, seemingly logical system of justifications around it. A professor who proves the scientific basis of racial theory is more dangerous than an ignorant person. His intellect becomes a lawyer for absurdity. Stupidity, according to Bonhoeffer, is not the inability to think, but an acquired refusal to think. A person does not lose his mind, he rents it out. High intelligence here works like a very sharp knife. It can be used to finely slice ingredients for a complex dish, or it can be used to methodically cut up a map to prove the world is flat. But what makes a person make this choice? The answer lies not in his head, but in his relationships with others. He expected to see ideological fanatics and sadists among his jailers. Instead, he saw something more disturbing, a void. The guards and interrogators were normal people. They spoke of their families but mindlessly carried out cruel orders. They did not seem evil, they seemed switched off. Here, Bonhoeffer makes a discovery. The problem is not what these people are, but what state they are in. He saw how the same guard could tenderly discuss his daughter's drawing and 5 minutes later, dispassionately carry out an order leading to someone's death. Their humanity was put on pause. He saw not millions of evil individuals, but millions of people in a state of induced stupidity. This is not a static trait, but a dynamic mode into which consciousness switches. A person becomes like an automaton that appears to function correctly but has no operator inside. It turned out this switch is not located within the person, but in the structure of power itself. What exactly breaks in a person, will, conscience, or reason? What breaks is his willingness to bear personal responsibility. A person ceases to be the author of his own judgments. He offloads this function onto a leader, a party, or popular opinion. He no longer asks what is right, he asks what is ordered. And this is not a loss, but a beneficial trade-off. In exchange for responsibility, a person receives huge psychological bonuses, a sense of belonging to a powerful group, confidence in his own righteousness, and most importantly, freedom from agonizing moral dilemmas. It is a psychological drug. A person becomes a moral child who gladly hands over decision-making to an adult, the state. It is like a person, tired of carrying the heavy backpack of responsibility, gladly giving it to a guide. He feels not a loss, but immense relief. He no longer thinks about the route, he simply follows the one who took his burden. There is a specific political event that serves as a universal trigger for an epidemic of stupidity. What trigger can switch millions of people into this mode? Powerful propaganda? A deep economic crisis? These factors are important, but they are merely conditions, not the trigger itself. Bonhoeffer's theory strikes a blow against this logic. The trigger is not abstract circumstances, but a specific political event, the rise to power of an authoritarian leader. Power does not persuade people to become stupid. It creates conditions in which stupidity becomes a strategy for survival and success. Stupidity, therefore, is not a property of individuals, but a disease of the social fabric. A person can be intelligent in his family and at work, but stupid as a citizen. It is not a virus, but a dormant gene in society that is activated instantly, turning a nation of thinkers into a crowd of followers within just a few months. In the next section, we will examine exactly how power unleashes this virus, which transforms free citizens into an obedient mass. Power does not persuade. It creates a wave. It does not coerce each individual separately, but changes the social atmosphere itself. A dictatorship gives tacit permission to be stupid. It offers a simple menu to the person weary of complexity, clear answers, identifiable enemies, and complete freedom from the burden of personal choice. This temptation proves almost irresistible. Power does not create stupidity from scratch. It makes it profitable. The refusal to think begins to be rewarded, while critical thinking is punished. Stupidity becomes a pass into the right society. Under the pressure of a dictatorship, the entire society freezes, turning into a monolithic ice of obedience. This same mechanism of infection operates on a much smaller scale, and perhaps right now, next to you. This law is universal. It works not only at the national level, it repeats itself in a corporation with a toxic, authoritarian director where employees are afraid to express their opinions, in a religious sect with a charismatic guru where any doubt is punished by expulsion, in an online community where dissenters are immediately canceled. Man is a social animal. His need to belong to a group is often stronger than his need for objective truth. We are more willing to be wrong with our own people than to be right alone. It is on this basic need that the virus of submission preys. Remember a time you agreed with your boss even though you knew he was wrong. What made you stay silent? Imagine you are in a room with 10 people. All of them confidently say that black is white. How long could you insist on your own view before you start doubting your own eyes? Solomon Asch's conformity experiments showed that group pressure can distort our basic perception of reality. 75% of participants agreed with the obviously incorrect majority opinion at least once, just to avoid standing out. But in Asch's experiments, nothing was at stake. Now imagine that disagreeing with the group threatens your job, your social status, or your family's safety. The pressure increases by orders of magnitude. The virus of submission turns the natural fear of isolation into a powerful tool of control. It creates a situation where the price of having your own opinion becomes exorbitant. When a person succumbs to this pressure, he loses more than just his voice. He begins to lose himself. What exactly happens inside an infected person? First, his speech changes. He starts speaking in ready-made phrases, slogans, and cliches from propaganda. His vocabulary becomes impoverished. His speech ceases to be a reflection of his thoughts and becomes an echo of someone else's will. But the most terrible thing happens deeper. The loss of language is followed by the loss of the ability to make independent judgments. Then, empathy for those designated as enemies by the system atrophies. Finally, the capacity for doubt disappears. The personality undergoes erosion. Like a rock in the wind, it loses the sharp edges of doubt and the contours of empathy until only a smooth, featureless stone remains. The person ceases to be an individual. He becomes a function, an instrument. In the next section, we will examine the main symptom of this transformation, one you might notice in your loved ones even today. Paradoxically, this process is not experienced as a loss, but as euphoria. A person sheds the unbearable burden of personal doubt. His internal compass, which constantly asks, "Is this right?" is replaced by a simple navigator. Does this comply with the order? He is no longer responsible for the outcome, the system is. And this feels like a colossal relief. The surrender of freedom is experienced as the acquisition of power, as a merger with something great and mighty. This euphoria gives rise to the main symptom, an absolute intolerance of dissent. Any question from the outside is perceived not as a reason for discussion, but as a personal attack on his new collective identity. Bonhoeffer was categorical. Such a person is incapable of dialogue. It is this trait that turns an ordinary citizen into the perfect executor of the most horrific orders. A loving father, a polite neighbor, a conscientious worker. His job is to organize the shipment of people to death camps. How does he reconcile these two realities? He tells himself, I am just following orders. These are the laws. If not me, then someone else. These formulas work like an anesthetic for the conscience, relieving him of personal responsibility. There were millions of such good citizens. The Nazi system was sustained not by Hitler, but by these executors who considered themselves decent people. Evil becomes banal. As Hannah Arendt wrote, it is committed not by demons, but by ordinary people who simply refused to think. Adolf Eichmann, the architect of the Holocaust, genuinely did not understand the charges against him at his trial in Jerusalem in 1961. He claimed his main concern was not conscience, but efficient logistics. But why can't even irrefutable facts pierce the armor of this self-justification? The answer lies in the language they use. The language of such a person becomes a diagnostic tool. He overuses impersonal constructions. They say that. It is believed that his speech is filled with ready-made cliches and slogans. There are no original personal formulations. But this is not just intellectual laziness. It is a defense mechanism driven by fear. The fear of saying the wrong thing, the fear of standing out from the group and being rejected. Language transforms from a tool of cognition into a tool of social mimicry, and this is one of the main goals of a totalitarian system, to create interchangeable units that speak and think alike. Such units are easy to manage. Their language acts like a sieve. It only lets through safe, system-approved words, while all complex, doubtful, and personal thoughts get stuck and never come out. Next, we will learn why trying to argue with such a unit using facts is not just useless, but counterproductive. What would happen if we presented such a person with irrefutable, documented facts that completely destroy his worldview? Common sense suggests he should have doubts. A rational argument should be the key to his mind. But reality is the exact opposite. When confronted with facts he dislikes, the fool does not change his opinion. He becomes even more aggressive and stubborn in his beliefs. Psychologists call this the backfire effect. Attempting to correct a false belief with facts only strengthens the belief in it. It is like showing a vampire a mirror that only makes him stronger. Why does the primary tool of enlightenment, facts and logic, prove to be completely powerless and even harmful? We are on the verge of the most sobering part of Bonhoeffer's theory, which explains why your rational argument with a fool is doomed to fail before it even begins. Because facts, even the most solid ones, bounce off him like peas off a wall. It is an invisible armor, and it protects not his reason but his identity. The fool is fundamentally not interested in the truth. His main goal is to preserve his worldview and his belonging to the group. When you present him with a fact, he does not hear your opinion is wrong. He hears you are a bad person, and your place in the world is under threat. The argument instantly shifts from an intellectual plane to an existential one. He is not defending his views, he is defending himself. His reaction is predictable. It is not a search for counter-arguments, but pure emotion, aggression, personal attacks. He instinctively tries to destroy the source of the threat, not analyze the information. But this is only the first level of his defense. It turns out that even if he engages in an argument, his brain operates by completely different rules. What exactly happens in his head when he hears a fact that contradicts his beliefs? How does his brain process this hostile information? Modern psychology calls this motivated reasoning. Our brain is wired by default not to seek truth, but to protect existing beliefs. In a fool, this mechanism operates at full capacity. His brain instantly switches to advocate mode. He does not analyze the fact, but looks for flaws in it. The source is unreliable, it's propaganda, the statistics are taken out of context. His entire intellect is dedicated to building these defensive barriers. You cannot win this argument because you are playing different games. You are playing chess by the rules of logic. He is boxing, where the goal is to knock out the opponent by any means necessary. This hopeless situation makes stupidity not just annoying, but truly dangerous, more dangerous than conscious evil. Let's imagine a dialogue. On one side, you are armed with statistics and documents. On the other, there is him. You systematically present the facts. In response, you get either a repeated slogan or a direct accusation. You're a traitor. You've been paid off. Your impeccable logic has no effect. This is precisely his tactic. He intuitively understands that he will lose a logical debate. Therefore, his task is to immediately destroy the very platform for debate. He does not dispute the fact, he attacks the opponent, changes the subject, or ignores the argument. He shifts the discussion into an emotional realm where facts do not matter. This is not a thinking error, but a perfect defense system. It is self-sufficient and hermetically sealed, like a submarine. No facts from the outside world can penetrate its hull. It is this complete imperviousness to reality that makes stupidity more terrifying than evil. A villain at least knows he is doing evil. The fool, however, commits it with a clear conscience. And therein lies his ultimate, deadly danger. So we are faced with a person convinced of his own righteousness. He is not a villain. He may sincerely wish his country well. Doesn't that make him less dangerous? It seems like a mitigating circumstance. He is not a cynic. He believes his actions lead to order and justice. But Bonhoeffer argues the exact opposite. It is this sincere belief in his own rightness that makes the fool infinitely more dangerous than the villain. You can negotiate with a villain. You can blackmail him. He understands the language of self-interest. The fool is completely unpredictable and uncontrollable. He is ready to press the red button not out of hatred, but out of a firm conviction that it is for the best. A villain has a limit, his own self-interest. A fool acting in the name of good has no limits. In the next section, we will uncover Bonhoeffer's most counterintuitive idea and finally understand why he feared good people more than outright scoundrels. A villain is predictable. He acts out of self-interest, fear, or hatred. He can be understood. His motives can be calculated. He knows he is committing evil, and this knowledge is his Achilles heel. He has a limit, the instinct for self-preservation. The fool, however, lacks self-criticism. His conscience has been delegated to an ideology. His righteousness is absolute. He is not just a weapon. He is a weapon that believes it is a surgeon's scalpel, saving a life. And therefore, he has no limits. This threat comes not from one person, but from millions who act as a single, mindless organism. How does this work in practice? A villain can be identified. His actions violate norms, he can be condemned and isolated. Society has mechanisms to protect itself from individual evil, but stupidity relies on the power of the collective. One villain can kill dozens. Millions of good citizens carrying out orders can destroy nations. Their strength lies not in cruelty, but in a mass refusal to think. But the main trick is different. Evil is forced to hide. Stupidity, however, always disguises itself as virtue, patriotism, order, security. Any criticism directed at it is perceived not as an argument, but as an attack on these sacred values. It is like a forest fire. A single spark of evil is a visible threat that can be extinguished. But the dry grass of the masses, ready for stupidity, creates a firestorm that feeds on itself. Bonhoeffer saw all this not in books, but in the faces of his jailers. He saw not monsters, but ordinary people convinced they were building a great Germany and following the law. They did not consider themselves villains, they were patriots doing their duty. It was this normality and self-satisfied certainty in their own righteousness that allowed them to commit the unthinkable. Their conscience was completely delegated to the Führer. Their hands were clean in their own eyes. In his letters from Tegel prison, Bonhoeffer described not screams, but the ringing silence of the corridors and the methodical clank of keys, the sound of order, which was more terrifying than any chaos. One should fear not the one who whispers, "I am doing evil," but the one who shouts with shining eyes, "I am bringing good." So, what should we do when faced with an impenetrable, self-satisfied mass force? Appealing to facts does not work. Logical arguments are pointless. Attempts at education are counterproductive. It seems the theory describes a closed loop with no way out. But Bonhoeffer himself, even on the verge of execution, was not a fatalist. He pointed to a single, albeit extremely difficult, solution. It lies not in politics or enlightenment, but in a completely different plane. It is not an external process, but an internal one. Something that cannot be imposed, but can be accomplished. It is not an argument, but a rebellion. Not a reason, but a liberation. In the next climactic section, we will reveal the essence of this soul remedy. This remedy cannot be found in a library or an argument. Bonhoeffer calls it an act of inner liberation. At first glance, this sounds like a beautiful but useless metaphor. But the reality is a gut punch. This is not a quiet epiphany over a cup of tea. It is a painful rupture. An existential rebellion against the group, the ideology, and the authority. It is not a change of opinion, but the reclaiming of a stolen conscience. And this requires colossal courage. This process is moral, not intellectual. That is why it cannot be induced from the outside. No one can liberate the fool, he can only liberate himself. It is like a seed breaking through asphalt. Nothing from the outside can force it to crack. It must break its own shell from within to reach the light. What must break within a person for him to go against everything he believed in? It seems that a powerful book or an irrefutable fact leads to enlightenment. But real examples show otherwise. The trigger is almost always not an argument, but a personal catastrophe. The moment when abstract slogans lead to a concrete tragedy, the death of a loved one, the loss of a home, personal humiliation by the very system he defended. It is at this moment that the ideological armor cracks. But the price of such an awakening is a complete break with one's surroundings and a threat to one's own safety. Liberation is not the acquisition of new knowledge, but a painful return to oneself, to the ability to feel and judge independently. It is always a trauma. And the most poignant example of the price and essence of such a liberation is the story of Dietrich Bonhoeffer himself. Was Bonhoeffer himself, the theorist of liberation, also its practitioner? He was a theologian, an intellectual, a committed pacifist. Logic guided him towards spiritual resistance, but not direct violence. Yet this pacifist became an active participant in a conspiracy to physically assassinate Hitler. What is this, if not a paradox? For him, it was not a political act, but a deeply moral one. His personal moment of truth. He concluded that in a situation of absolute evil, neutrality and non-violence become forms of complicity. This was his act of liberation from his own most sacred dogmas. For this liberation, he paid the ultimate price. He was executed on April 9, 1945, just 23 days before Germany's surrender. He lost his life, but preserved what was more important, his conscience. His story was born in that era. But what relevance does a theory from a Nazi prison have for us, living in the 21st century? It seems we are protected. We have access to limitless information. We are more educated. But our technology has not become a shield. It has created the perfect incubator for stupidity. Today, a strong personality is an influencer with millions of followers. Slogans are viral memes and hashtags, and the refusal to judge is living in the echo chamber of social media, where dissenting opinions simply do not exist. In 1945, propaganda reached ears through the radio. Today, algorithms deliver it directly to the brain over 4.5 billion times a day. The threat has not disappeared. It has mutated and become more contagious. We have received Bonhoeffer's 6 keys. Now we must assemble them into a single survival guide. In the final section, we will provide tools you can apply today to protect your own mind. We have spent a long time looking at the threat from the outside. Now for the most difficult step, looking in the mirror. Here is a checklist for the virus of stupidity, not for judgment, but for self-diagnosis. First point, your speech. Do you speak in ready-made slogans, memes, or hashtags? Do you feel that the thought has already been packaged by someone else, and you are simply broadcasting it? Second point, your reaction to dissent. Does a differing opinion that contradicts yours evoke curiosity or an immediate, irrational aggression? Do you consider the holder of a different opinion not just wrong, but a bad, immoral person? If you notice these symptoms in yourself or your loved ones, it is not a verdict. It is a signal that it's time to move to a defense strategy. Which of these symptoms do you most often notice in social media debates? Instinct screams if you see something wrong, argue. But Bonhoeffer's theory proves this is the worst possible tactic. Rule number 1. Do not engage in an argument. For the fool, it is not a search for truth, but a confirmation of his belonging to the group. Your facts will only strengthen his conviction. Rule number 2. Do not try to liberate. True liberation can only be an internal act. An attempt to save someone from the outside will be perceived as an act of violence. And most importantly, the positive rule number 3, strengthen your own independence. This is the only real battle, the fight for your own mind. Consciously seek out opinions you disagree with. Doubt what seems obvious. Trying to persuade a fool with facts is like trying to open a lock with the wrong key. His consciousness is opened by the key of group belonging, not logic. We have understood how to protect ourselves. But now, for the most honest question, are we willing to pay the price? Today, it is not always a threat to life as it was in Bonhoeffer's time. Today, the price is the risk of social isolation, cancel culture, and losing friends on social media. It is the discomfort of constant doubt while everyone around enjoys simple, clear certainty. Ash's experiments showed that up to 75% of people are willing to agree with an incorrect group opinion to avoid discomfort. Resisting stupidity is not about loud debates, but a quiet, daily choice. The choice for complexity over simplicity, for a question over a ready-made answer, for conscience over group loyalty. Bonhoeffer's example shows that what is at stake is not being right in an argument, but preserving one's own humanity. We have followed Dietrich Bonhoeffer's entire analysis. We have weighed all the arguments. Now it is time for you to draw your own conclusion. Look at the modern world, at the conflicts, the politics, the debates on the internet. What, in your opinion, poses a greater threat to our future today? Cynical and conscious evil that knows what it is doing? Or mass, self-satisfied stupidity that is sincerely convinced of its own righteousness? Write just one word in the comments below this video, evil or stupidity. No explanations, just your choice. Let's map our common fears together. Your choice is not the end of the discussion. It is its true beginning. Thank you for thinking with us.